Hello there. What is going on, everyone? Today we are talking about Star Wars Shatterpoint and asking the question, is it as bad as it seems? Can it weather the storm? Is it at a crossroads? What is the future for Star Wars Shatterpoint? Because after Adepticon, it was not really talked about that much, at least in my circles. It had a very light roadmap, and we're going to go over the roadmap because I don't think it's actually that bad, but I think there is definitely some takeaways with Star Wars Shatterpoint. If you guys are new here to the channel, I do talk a lot about Star Wars and tabletop games. There's still time left to enter to win the $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. I typically announce winners towards the end of my videos. It should be a couple more days. I'll be announcing the winner for that one, and then another one will start shortly thereafter. But with all that said, let's go ahead and dive into the meat and potatoes of the video. I want to talk a little bit about the light amount of content that Star Wars Shatterpoint had at Adepticon this year. There were really only 2 expansions announced for the show, and at least new expansions. And while they were exciting, I don't think that means that the lack of content with the future of Star Wars Shatterpoint is an immediate sign that the game is getting canceled. I don't think there's necessarily evidence for that. Of course, you could possibly come to that if you were somebody that liked to kind of jump to conclusions, as of course I will admit I have been guilty of doing in the past. But I think it's more or less a symptom of manufacturing capabilities and priorities. And I think priorities right now are probably with Star Wars Legion and Marvel Crisis Protocol, 2 games that that perform much better than Star Wars Shatterpoint does and have a larger player base and larger communities and are generally considered to be better games. Not to say that Star Wars Shatterpoint is a bad game for everybody. It's certainly not a game that I'm super crazy about, but I think there are people that are definitely fans of Shatterpoint. I talked to some of them at Adepticon as well, and I got some interesting perspectives on while there's things about the game that I'm not crazy about, there's some of those things are things that other people really enjoy for different reasons. The randomness of activating orders appeals to some people. The fact that nobody really dies in the game is also a big thing that appeals to some folks, and I definitely understand that. That's one of the reasons I want to talk a little bit about Shatterpoint. And I don't necessarily think the sky is falling for this game, but I think Adepticon gives us a roadmap that indicates that there is definitely a shift, because we used to get a lot more content for Shatterpoint announced, and that content has shrunk a little bit. So let's walk through. We're going to actually run through the roadmap for 2025. So Atomic Mass did announce tournament kits that we're going to be shipping for 2025, as well as a store league kit. Now, these are going to have foil cards, promos, dice, all kinds of stuff like that. So they are continuing with organized play. Again, more and more reasons to say that, like, the sky isn't falling. They're still continuing to support the game. There's all of the stuff they announced at previous, mini extravaganzas. All of this stuff is coming out. Rogue One is seeing a big push for Star Wars Shatterpoint. Cassian Andor, K2SO, all the Way Pack, the Deploy the Garrison Pack. Again, all of this stuff for Rogue One. Jyn Erso, and this is Rogue One, of course, with Baze, Malbus, and Chirrut Imwe. By the way, why aren't those guys in Star Wars Legion yet? I'm definitely waiting for them. But all that stuff was announced. Something that, well, not really a gameplay expansion, and this one was kind of marketed as both a kind of a hybrid, both for Star Wars Legion and for Shatterpoint, is the Outer Rim Outpost Terrain Pack. This one works for either game system, and to me, actually, it was in with the Star Wars Legion miniatures. This one looked a little bit more like a Star Wars Legion expansion, more so than a Shatterpoint expansion, primarily because it doesn't kind of fit the mold of having, where the gratings and the scaffolding can connect to it and stuff like that. But it does have flat surfaces, so you can have somebody on top of them. But it's more like scatter terrain. And it doesn't look like it's a particularly large pack. Plus, it has a little dragon in there. So if you want to be able to, in keeping with the Shatterpoint tradition of having a cute little critter in every terrain pack, this one has one as well. And then the Delta Squad Form Up Squad Pack. This one is the only squad, I think, that has squad twice in the name. The Delta Squad Form Up Squad Pack. Delta Squad Form Up Squad Pack. Of course, that's not how you're supposed to say it. You're supposed to say Delta Squad Form Up, and then pause, and then say Squad Pack. But just to be silly, I like saying Delta Squad Form Up Squad pack. Because it sounds sillier to say it that way. Again, this is all stuff that was announced back at last mini extravaganza, stuff that was announced last year. Although, granted, a lot of the stuff we had concept art for, and we didn't have full painted models. So this was showing that these things are farther in production. The Terror from Below, again with Riff Tamson, who I'm very excited to hopefully see show up to Star Wars Legion one day. Really cool character. I love the idea of shark people. I used to play a game called City of Heroes. Do you guys remember City of Heroes? This was an MMO from like the early 2000s. I think it came out in 2003. Really enjoyed this game. They had a shark character in that game, and then you could, if you were playing a villain, you could kind of like take the shark guy career path, and you got these cool water abilities and stuff. And when Riff Tamson hit the Clone Wars, it always made me think of City of Heroes and that shark guy. That was one of my favorite guys to kind of emulate in that game. So anyway, a little side note, but we do get some really cool stuff from Ahsoka, and we are going to see the Secure the Future squad pack. Now, this is going to be coming in mid or early, hopefully, but probably mid 2026, with Baylan Skoll is kind of featured in this one. And of course, you got Shin Hati, and they've got those little droids. Really cool looking pack, very popular character, by far the most beloved and popular character from Ahsoka, and of course Ray Stevenson, rest in peace. It's kind of a sad case too that we lost such a powerful actor after such an incredible performance. But now we're getting the Baylan Skoll pack here, and it's an awesome looking skull. I love the overhand grip. It's one thing I will say about Shatterpoint I always really appreciated is the sculpts are very dynamic. They do some really cool stuff with these miniatures, and it is a pretty cool thing. And then also the My Loyalty, My Life squad pack, or we're going to be getting zombies. It's all zombies. And the Blade of Talzin, and then then the gold and wrapped troopers and stuff like that. We're getting zombies in Star Wars Shatterpoint. So while this is cool, the stuff from Ahsoka is cool, these two were really the only thing that was a new expansion, or technically two new expansions, but they kind of go together, right? But the only two new expansions that were announced for Star Wars Shatterpoint at Adepticon. And this is why initially one of my first takeaways was, whoa, that doesn't seem good for Star Wars Shatterpoint. But I had a little bit of time to reflect on what was coming. I'm going to leave it on this graphic for a little while because I like that art. So here's my takeaways for Star Wars Shatterpoint. There's limited factories, right? They can't just make 10 million miniatures all at once. They have to space them out. They also have to focus on what's making the most money and what needs the most attention right now. A big part of that is Marvel Crisis Protocol. Marvel Crisis Protocol has new starters that are being put out. There's a lot of stuff that's backlogged that has not been available for the public recently. And then, of course, Star Wars Legion with the massive new push for Star Wars Legion. All of that is coming out within the next year. And so a lot of their production capability has got to be geared towards Marvel Crisis Protocol and Star Wars Legion. And if you have taken a look at both of those games, you would have seen that there's a lot of new starters coming out for those, a lot of new products. Let's jump towards the release schedule. It's a very small release schedule when you compare this to the other games. Very, very, very little here. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that Shatterpoint is dead. Keep in mind that each one of these packs has typically at least 4 miniatures in there as well. So you are getting a decent amount of stuff that's going to be released, over the rest of this year and up to next year. We're usually expecting there to be a little bit more in the way of previews, especially at Adepticon, which is usually the biggest news event of the year. This doesn't necessarily mean that there's a huge problem with Shatterpoint, though. Now I do think this does show that Shatterpoint probably has kind of peaked in terms of how rapid expansions are going to be. I think if you're a Shatterpoint player, maybe you won't be as overwhelmed with constant new releases all the time anymore, as is the case when a game is brand new. I think this just represents a slowdown and maybe a more of a stabilization when it comes to Shatterpoint. Again, that's all dependent upon the entire tariff system. Of course, could push all of this stuff back much farther. They could have other stuff that's in development right now that they just weren't ready to release yet. They weren't ready to tease. We also know that there were some meetings with LFL regarding Star Wars Legion and some units being removed. It's also entirely possible that they had more things planned that they just for licensing reasons couldn't announce yet. So there's a lot of possibilities, but they haven't announced the ending of Shatterpoint. They haven't announced anything like that. So it doesn't seem like that's the case. It seems like this is just a slowdown to give a little bit of breathing room to the other games and possibly a hint of things to come. Like we may see fewer expansions released for Star Wars Shatterpoint in the future. If I were a betting person, I would probably bet that Star Wars Shatterpoint will see a lighter release schedule over 2026 and maybe even into 2027, with possibly a bump if they take a new direction in Shatterpoint, if they happen to do a big new push. Let's say, for example, they do High Republic, or let's say, for example, they do sequel trilogy stuff, and they need to do like Rey and Kylo Ren and First Order Stormtroopers and Captain Phasma and all this stuff. You might see like a big push if there's a new era that they dive into or something like that. But in the absence of that, if they're just basically maintaining the game with organized play and regular but maybe lighter new release schedule, then I think this is perfectly healthy for a game that's already established, even if it is a little bit lighter than we were used to. The really big shock, though, is just that it was only those 2 expansions that were the only new things that were teased at Adepticon. So, again, it probably is just the factories. But let me know in the comments section if you think that this is a sign of doom and gloom, or if you think it's just par for the course for where Shatterpoint is at in the market. It's easily, according to most retailers and people that I subscribe to and people that I listen to, it seems universally kind of reported that Shatterpoint is definitely the least well-selling of the 3 games that Atomic Mass Games still supports. And so, if one had to have a lighter release schedule, it makes perfect sense for it to be Shatterpoint right now. But just because it's in 3rd place doesn't mean it's going the way of X-Wing and Armada anytime soon. So that's my takeaway. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. You can keep the discussion going in our Discord. You can jump in there and let us know what you think, because there's definitely more stuff coming, and very cool stuff coming too. Shatterpoint sometimes gets really cool new units before everybody else, and so sometimes that can also be maybe a hint of things to come for other games. Certainly one of the ways that I like to look at it. Plus, it's cool to see those really cool new sculpts and who knows what else will come. All right, that's going to do it for today's video. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Big thanks to my patrons. You guys are amazing and help make this whole channel possible. I will talk to you later. May the Force be with you. Live long and prosper. Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes, and always wash your socks.